welcome to your Innovation Technology General Services Committee. I'm joined by my colleague, Councilmember O'Farrell. Councilmember Bonin is unable to join us today, so you just have the majority of the committee here with you. Mr. Villanueva, are there any general public comment cards?
We don't have any, sir. None.
No cards today, okay. Great. I'm going to start by recommending that items 4 and 5 be approved on consent.
No objection.
Without objection, that is the order. So 4 and 5 is on consent, and we have 4 other items pending. So we will begin with item number 1. Mr. Villanueva, would you please read that item?
Certainly, sir. So, item number 1 is a verbal report from the General Manager of the Information Technology Agency relative to the top 10 department priorities.
Yeah, for all you following it along at home, item 1 is really 10 separate little items, but it's always an exciting one, and we always like to hear the General Manager give us the update on all the exciting things ITA is doing. So, Mr. Brennan.
Honorable Chairman, member of the ITGS, our first item is really kind of come to us in more of a crisis state right now. We have, as Avasant through our strategic advisor has pointed out, about 60% of our employees are going to be eligible for retirement. We've already started to see the influx of that over the first 2 months of this fiscal year. We've also seen that there's an absence of people that are on the civil service exam list. And also in taking a look at contract services, we don't have contract services for a lot of the resources we need. So we're going through a number of different things right now to make sure that we've got the ability to fill vacancies that are occurring in ITA. So one of the things that we're also doing is not just looking at this from an ITA standpoint, because this is a citywide issue. So we're actually drafting a recommended student internship program. We expect the draft to be out within the next 30 days. We'll be working it with the CIO's office and with the mayor's office as well, and probably bringing that back here, pending your guidance. But the number one issue is really in our data networking group, and that's where we're having a lot of deficiencies and need for attention. So that's our number one priority right now.
Right, and I understand in this one you're recruiting a lot of folks from military who have the radio data training.
That's our focus right now, because they're the only ones with that background.
Yeah, which is I love that idea, and something I was very focused on when I was in the state legislature, trying to figure out how to capture some of the training that our military folks have, and how do you transition them into the civilian sector and capitalize on that. And did a bill about troops to trucks, where we got the training that military folks had on driving trucks to apply to locally, one with paramedics, and the training the field officers or field folks have had. And so the idea of capitalizing on this very specialized training that they have there and taking advantage of the city and actually seeking out veterans who have that is one that I not only support, but I want to encourage all departments to do, because it serves multiple functions, and any way that we can be helpful, obviously, of all the stuff you're doing, but particularly in this realm of getting the word out, that's something that I think the council can be helpful with as well. And we as a city get a multiple benefit. We get the benefit of that training, and we really are doing something for our city and across a multitude of platforms, whether it's homelessness or anything else. So thank you for that.
Sure thing.
Everyone on that one, we'll move to number.
So item number 2 is the citywide email and desktop enterprise standards RFP. We've got all the financials done on them. We have the committee, because of alternating vacations and things. Everybody's back now, so they'll be meeting in the next week or 2. We expect that we'll be elevating 2 finalists in around the October timeframe, and then we'll be scheduling with those final 2 finalists the demonstrations of the product and bringing together all the IT experts from the departments in to evaluate the technical components of those proposals. So we're still on track for end of the year, coming back to this committee with a recommendation.
And is CGIS still a big problem in that, in terms of figuring out how to?
Certainly is a big issue. We want to make sure it's a level playing field between the vendors that offer that service, and that will be a requirement to make sure that LAPD is inclusive in the recommendations. The third is the citywide broadband RFP. So from the RFI responses, we are nearing recommendations on what a potential plan will look like, or business model. that we would go out to bid for. But Best and Krieger, who's an outside counsel, has also created a long list of policy decisions that need to be made. So we'll be starting to go through some of those policy decisions, and we'll be looking forward to coming back to this committee with some recommendations. Another thing that we're doing, because the number one issue that came out from the RFI was our permitting processes. We need to demonstrate what we are going to do as a city to demonstrate that we have an expedited permitting process. So what we're doing is we've met with all the departments that would potentially have impact from permitting issues associated with this RFP. We'll be doing a kickoff meeting with them in the next 2 weeks. And what this kickoff meeting is going to do is spend the time and effort to diagram the current processes that are in place, and then work with the city attorney's office and others on what an expedited permitting process would look like. We're also working in conjunction with the mayor's office on what it might look to support a budget package around a single point of contact for this project. One of the things we learned from Austin as they had AT&T and Google coming into those communities, having a single point of contact was extremely helpful. We lack that currently, and so that's something that they're looking at recommending and trying to get support around. Also, from a permitting perspective, we're also trying to consider what it might look like to have a digital infrastructure permitting group, perhaps inside the planning department, that might deal not just with issues associated with this RP, but also issues around cellular providers, maybe other technology initiatives going on, electric vehicle charging stations, where people need to, if we want to roll these initiatives out quickly, we need some process dedicated to seeing that through faster.
That's great. Great idea. And they're also working BBK on the PR side of it, the contract, is that still?
That's correct. So BBK is actually has that out right now, so I haven't seen the responses back, but as soon as they come back, they'll be sharing them with our committee.
Great.
Just a quick comment on that. A couple of weeks ago, we dedicated free Wi-Fi in 6 of our city parks, including Reseda and Echo Park and Griffith Park, through a partnership with Toyota, Prius specifically. Might there, even though it's completely different, it's free Wi-Fi at some of our city parks, and it's, I like to think of it as like the beginning of free Wi-Fi. Might there be anything to glean from that in relation to this effort?
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, we want to encourage projects like that to continue to happen, and I think one of the things that we're learning from it is because rolling out Wi-Fi citywide is really complicated, and having to roll it out in a lot of public spaces costs a lot of money. So I think one of the things that we're going to be looking at with the sponsorship from Toyota for those efforts is maybe a sponsorship type of program in our public spaces, a best practice or a model to consider. So we're watching that closely, and we're talking it amongst the committee to see, should we just offer that up as a potential suggestion for our public places so that we might be able to have different sponsors in different locations in order to provide a higher speed, faster, and more reliable Wi-Fi network. Number 4 is the Avison Strategic Technology Services project. It's come to conclusion. We're working with the CIO's office right now in writing up a response to that, and we hope within the next 30 days we'll be coming back to here with some recommendations.
Great. Well, I look forward to talking with you about that even in the interim as that rolls out.
You bet. The city's digital inclusion e-waste pilot is coming along nicely. There's about 5,000 systems that are now in the warehouse. We have 2 agencies that are staffing up, and starting within the next 2 to 3 weeks, they'll begin the refurbishment of these 5,000 systems. And each of the agencies kind of has a different business model. Some will go to training centers that will be directed towards low-income families. The other half will end up going to nonprofit agencies as a whole, and they determine how their distribution is going to take place for those families to benefit from. So it's an exciting project.
And we've talked a lot about this, and it's really exciting as it's moving forward. It seems with relatively little hitches. I mean,
so far. The content management system number 6, we have awarded the contract to Acquia, who is actually going to be hosting lacity.org and a few other city websites. Their content management system is called Drupal, which is hosted. We're one of their largest customers now. A lot of interest in the industry around this project right now. And we've completed much of the training, and we're looking at implementation and go live towards the end of the year.
Which citywide websites will be the first ones to be upgraded?
So lacity.org, Channel 35 are our first targets. There'll be a few others and some smaller organizations to follow as well.
Makes sense.
Item number 7 was an IT infrastructure report on debt projects. So these would be potential capital programs that could be funded. So that was heard yesterday at Budget and Finance. We had worked with the CAO's office on what we thought was a priority list of infrastructure projects that are outdated, haven't been properly replaced and kept current. And so we look forward to working with the CAO's office through the budgetary process. And I know there was a call back for sometime in the first part of the year on our progress there. And I think as the CAO indicated, there's already efforts underway with many of those that are on the list, like with our procurement system, with performance-based budgeting, but there's a long list of projects that need attention.
This was a response to one of the report backs I'd asked for during the Budget Committee, and I think you guys are right on target in that we do need to have a different type of way to fund virtual capital infrastructure, and I guess we decided in Budget Committee yesterday for a 90-day report back for that, but I'm glad that IT is in the middle of that. It's not the CAO is working on it, but you guys have to be right there with them, so I'm glad that's on the top 10 list.
Item number 8 is the audit regarding PEG and Fund 342, which is the franchise fee revenue and public education government 1% fund that comes into the city, and having a long-range plan for effective use of the funds. So today we'll actually be responding back to the controller regarding the audit and those findings. And we'd like to come back and work with you, Councilman, and the mayor's office regarding what those priorities should be for the funded entities. Obviously, the number one biggest funded item is the redo of the Merced Theater at El Pueblo, where we'll be moving Channel 35 out of leased facilities into a historic facility to gain benefit for the city, to revitalize a historic structure and also provide adequate space at a single facility for the first time for Channel 35. So we're excited about that, and about 90% of all the franchise, the PEG revenue that's coming in, that was the issue associated with a large spend or an account that has a large amount of money in it. Most all of that will be allocated towards that project, but there's obviously year-over-year increase in funds, and we're looking forward to working with you on appropriate spending of those dollars as well.
Yeah, it would be great to get even just a menu of, because it's such a restricted use, that what the kinds of things we could spend it on. And,
exactly.
But all exciting stuff.
Could you remind us what the year-after-year increase in the funds are, ballpark?
So in the case of the PEG funds, I believe it's in the tune of $3 to $4 million a year. And the franchise revenue is specifically allocated towards specific use, like the staffing for Channel 35, for 311, things like that. And we go through the budgetary process, so that all of that is fully allocated every single year.
Thank you.
Number 9 is the disaster recovery site at Switchnap. We are developing the project plan along with that, inventorying Van Nuys, which is our current DR site. There's a lot of equipment at Van Nuys that we will repurpose for Switch to reduce our cost associated with the new equipment that will be going out there as well. And we're in the process of ordering the fiber circuit between Las Vegas and City Hall to have that in place. So everything's still on target, and we hope to have all of the 5 mission-critical systems that will be part of that effort live by June of next year.
So June of next year is when they'd be running out of Las Vegas, or when they'd have that capability?
That's when we'll have the DR test capability for all those facilities and be able to test the hot site capabilities.
Any sense of how Napa's disaster recovery system worked?
I just know they lost a lot of wine.
Yeah, well, that was a disaster for sure.
From a technology perspective, I haven't heard that they had any issues there from that
It's good
perspective.
that you're focused on the important things.
That's right. First things first. Item number 10 is our Splunk security pilot. for the CICC. We actually have the product in site. We've allocated storage space. We have it up and running. We have the vendor coming out this week that will start identifying how we're going to configure and architect the system. I'm happy to say that we have hired a Chief Information Security Officer. We have Tim Lee from the ports that will be starting on September the 8th. So he'll be taking the lead for all of our cybersecurity issues within the ITA, and he'll also take a lead role for the Cyber Intrusion Command Center, of which this pilot is going to try to show that we can have a dashboard that shows the levels of security and sophistication that we have in the ITA today, but that could be something that could spread around to all of the proprietary departments as well.
Great.
And that's it.
All right. Any questions? No, thanks. Thank you very much. Appreciate that top 10 report. A lot of good stuff. Mr. Villanueva, if you would read item number 2.
Yes, sir. Item number 2 is an item that was continued from April 23rd, 2014. It's General Services Department, Information Technology Agency, Los Angeles Police Department, and Los Angeles Fire Department's joint report relative to the upgrade and replacement of the city's current vehicle management system. We don't have any cards on this item.
No cards. Great. So then we can start with our presentations.
Good afternoon. I'm Angela Sheriff Wright with the Department of General Services. Today I have with me Maggie Goodrich from the Police Department and Ted Ross from ITA.
Welcome.
We're basically coming before you today with a report back. This was something that came before your committee back in May. At that time, you asked us to report back on staffing, cost, and security requirements for the police department. In addition to that, during budget discussions, there was actually a study that was asked us to report back on as well. So this report will address both of those issues. The vehicle management system is basically a full-service fleet management system that oversees equipment and vehicles for the fleet departments, police, fire, and GSD. It tracks information through parts cost, labor cost, and maintenance cost. Basically, all of the departments that are coming before you with this report have this system, and they've had it since 1996 when it was installed. While it was installed in 1996, the actual technology is from 1980. So this has been around for quite a bit of time. The vendor that we have on board is AssetWorks. They are currently supporting the system. However, we do have concerns that at some point they won't support it any longer because it has been around for such a long time. There's actually been 5 upgrades on this current system that the city has right now. Some concerns that we have with the system is that it is an antiquated system, and ITA has been trying to get away from network systems. I think Ted can talk a little bit about that.
Correct. It's another one of those mainframe applications. So once again, we're discussing 1980s technology, and while it certainly can do some things well, it is a product that the vendor's been looking to no longer sell, and anybody who's implementing an AssetWorks vehicle management system is no longer implementing this version or this type of application. And it heralds to some of our previous discussions regarding a lot of the savings we can get as a city for us to try to eliminate mainframe applications and move on to what they call distributed. So,
some of the operational benefits from the M5 system are the vehicle asset lifecycle tracking for procurement and also for salvaged items. The ability to track funding source. Right now, the system doesn't have the ability to do that. If we purchase something through MICLA, which for the most part, all of our replacement vehicles are purchased through, we don't have a way to actually track that funding source. It can also track funding, let's say, through sanitation. We buy vehicles through SWRF, and this system will be able to actually track that. Another plus for this system is it actually offers customer portals. So let's say the CAO wanted to determine how many MICLA vehicles we actually have and when they should be sold. The CAO can actually have a portal and look into the system and determine that information. Just as sanitation can look into the system and determine how many vehicles they have in, when we're maintaining them, and we can actually give them access to the system, and that's the same with all the other departments as well. So this is a real step up for us with respects to customer service. With respects to cost, which is something you actually asked us to report back on as well, currently we have $3.1 million in the unappropriated balance. However, with security requirements that we have to address for the police department, as well as positions that were not addressed previously, the cost of the system has gone up to $5.5 million, which is basically about a $2.4 million shortfall. What we're asking for is to use a portion of the money in the UB to get the system started, about 1.7 million, with the understanding that we could not go forward until we get the 2.4 million to complete the project. The project will be completed in 6 phases with over a 20-month period. And with respects to security, because that was one of your specific questions, I'd like Maggie to talk about that.
Sure. So the original solution that was being looked at was actually a solution that would be hosted by the vendor rather than on-premise here and supported by ITA. When I was brought into the discussion and articulated the security requirements that LAPD would have, because we're talking about unmarked vehicles used by undercover officers and the like, we obviously have some security concerns. The vendor wasn't really in a place to go ahead and provide those security concerns right off the bat. They would have to actually build out some infrastructure in order to address those needs. It's just not a typical need of their other typical customers. They weren't really prepared to support law enforcement, essentially. They did cost that out. It came back as significantly more money for them to go ahead and do that, and that's when ITA began costing out what it would look like to have ITA actually do the hosting in-house.
Correct. And so, year one, there was already a savings when we compared the cost of vendor hosting versus hosting through ITA. And in subsequent years, it got to the point where we were about 50% of the cost of the vendor option. So we already manage and support quite a few public safety applications, so there's a much lower risk in us performing that service and delivering out of our data center, in addition to the fact that we're significantly cheaper. Based on our cloud-first strategy, we try to assess vendor hosting for each opportunity to see if it's cost-effective and a better route for the city. In this situation, it was not a better route.
Now, going back to the staffing, so with respect to all of the departments, when we first came before you, we had a proposal that was $3.1 million. That was the proposal by the vendor. At that time, as Maggie said, we didn't include the security requirements for police departments. So we're adding positions for ITA for that, as well as all of the other departments. When we first came before you, we had support from the previous mayor's administration. And at that time, because of the budget constraints, we didn't request positions for all the departments. What we're coming before you with now actually has positions for all the departments. So there are about 9 positions that are included in this request, but they are we're actually adding them on through the phases. So for phase 1 of the project, it would include positions for ITA and GSD. The second year would include positions for LAFD, and the third year would include positions for LAPD. So basically, again, the request that we're putting before you requests that if you approve this, it's with the understanding that we need to have the entire project funded.
Help me understand I'm getting a little confused on the cost increases. So it was originally 3.1 million. Then we had the security concerns, and that raised it by another 2.4 million. But
actually, the 2.4 million is the overall increase
the
in the
net.
project. That includes all of the positions. That includes the security concerns. That includes everything at this point.
Right, because as I understand it, maybe I'll talk more generically. It started out at a certain price, 3.1 million.
Correct.
Security concerns and the extra positions bumped it up substantially.
Correct.
But that was assuming an off-site hosting. Then when we agree to host it ourselves, that brings it down.
Right.
And then that creates a net of 5.5. And so far, so good, what I'm saying? Okay. And so then the question is, from my perspective, how much of that, to try to compare apples to apples, how much of the $2.4 million increase is due to the security, and how much is it due to the positions that were really, I guess the positions one's is a funny one, because you're saying those were going to be costs no matter what, right? But they just were hidden before. In the $3.1 million proposal, they were hidden costs?
They were not hidden costs. They were never included. What we went before you with previously did not include positions. We had support for the project without positions. So because we ended up having to request hosting by ITA, we were going to have to request 3 positions for ITA. And at that point, because we were going to be increasing the cost, we went ahead and included the positions for all of the departments.
I guess that's where I'm losing it. So the new positions for ITA, I get it. Those are part of the delta. That's new positions that were created out of the savings from the moving it to hosting it in-house. But the other positions, the LAPD positions, the LAFD positions, we would have needed those positions even under the first proposal.
That's correct. So
why weren't they included in the original $3.1 million proposal?
Because there were actually budget constraints that were included at that. There were budget constraints, and so when we went forward with the proposal originally, we went forward with the knowledge that we would have to go back in and do budget requests for positions. And the first time that we came before you, we had actually done budget requests for all the departments. Those budget requests were actually denied. So in coming back to you this time,
Right.
we are giving you all the costs that were not included previously. We all did budget requests for actually for
So
this
maybe
fiscal year.
when I used the word hidden, I didn't mean that to be a judgmental term. I didn't, because that's not, I get it with the budget constraints. It's just more that those positions existed, they just weren't
Included. They just weren't-
transparent, so they were included for whatever reason. So in order to understand the delta, those positions, how much of the $2.4 million increase is due to those positions that really were part of the $3.1 million request before but just weren't articulated, and versus the increase due to the security? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And that number is actually about 900,000.
900,000 is the positions or the security?
Oh, those are the positions. The security actually is about 1 million. Because remember, we had savings when we went with ITA. There were savings, and so basically we're taking advantage of those savings.
So there's still $500,000 we're missing. Because 1 million plus 900,000 is 1.9. 2.4 minus 1.9 is 500.
It's actually in software and hardware that ITA will need to purchase. It's about 369,500.
Okay. So I won't quibble over the other 200,000.
So here
but
it is. So for all the positions total, it's 2.1 million. For all the hardware and the software and the training that ITA will need, it's 369,500. So if you add those together, that's where you get the 2.4 million.
Okay. And I'm saying the 2.1. So how much of that was the positions? And I guess this is not the budget committee, but sometimes I still wear that hat. But how much of that 2.1 million is the positions that were otherwise needed, not including the new ITA positions, but I'm trying to compare apples to apples. I'm trying to add whatever number you're coming up with to the 3.1 million, so I can see what the true delta is between the projects.
Yeah, maybe about half.
Close to half.
Yeah, about half.
Okay. So about 1.05 million, or about $1 million or so, you're saying is new positions. Where's the old position? So the price is going up another additional 1.5 million due to the security concerns. Net.
Yes.
Yes,
And it would have gone up even more, except that we're hosting it in-house.
correct.
How much would it have been if we didn't host it in-house?
So they were going to be charging about $723,000 a year. So do we use a 2-year number or a 3-year number for the total? So the 3-year number would have been 2.1 million all by themselves for vendor hosting. And in comparison, ITA is costing about 1.3 million for that time frame. And that includes both salaries as well as hardware and software.
I think I get it a little bit more. Obviously, the whole point of this is something that we need at the end of the day because, as you mentioned, we're not only out of compliance, but we're missing a lot of opportunities. Were you able to quantify in any way that the savings that we're going to see from having a system like this? Is it just the opportunity cost of not having a system that's crumbling, or are we actually going to save money through the efficiencies of having this system that can be quantified?
I wasn't able to actually quantify savings because of the system. It's more so that we have a system that's crumbling. We're not taking advantage of all the benefits that the new system would offer. For instance, our ability to actually track things through funding source, our ability to sell salvage items when they should be sold rather than holding them. And I haven't been able to quantify that for all the departments yet.
No, those are great line of questions. It looks like through the next 2 fiscal years, though, we'll make this funding package whole, and that's the aim. And it looks like we're talking about security, personnel and equipment combined, and that's really the ingredients of the pot.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
And I mean, in the future, this would be an ideal example of something that would be part of our virtual infrastructure funding, where we would have a different way of handling it, as opposed to approving the money now and then assuming that we're going to approve the money next year when we really are not in a, we cannot bind the future council and we don't know what the circumstances will be, but obviously we're, if we don't approve it next year, we're throwing away the money that we're spending now, which sometimes makes sense, but not something you never want to do.
Well, not only that, is that we would have 2 systems.
Right.
Because LAPD would not be able to move over. So that's additional funding that we would be paying.
Mr. Chairman, that's an excellent point. The nature of IT investment is it's the same way as an individual. It's often very difficult to buy a car out of cash or buy a house out of cash. Not everyone has that type of bank account. And so the reality investments in things like IT are usually multi-year and can be multi-million dollars depending on the type of system that's being implemented. And so it is difficult to budget that year to year, and the reality is these often are capital investments, the same way that we may build a street or we may build a building.
And one more question. I'm going to say last, but I never want to say that because I might come up with another one. What's the life projection on this new system?
The last one's 20 years. So. What do you say, Ted?
Yeah, if we can do periodic upgrades, then we could certainly get the same type of time frame out of it. So it's on one of the big deltas to it is that it's sitting on a mainframe platform. It's a platform that's no longer being sold or maintained. And so this would be on a distributed system platform that isn't going anywhere. Amazon, Yahoo, Google, they're all running on these distributed servers, virtualized servers. And so it's something we would think is a very sound investment from an IT perspective.
Okay, then without objection, I'm going to recommend that we approve joint report to transfer $3.1 million from the UB to ITA to begin work on this project. Or actually, you said not the 3.1, but
1.7.
1.7. My notes were saying 3.1, so we're only a portion of the 3.1, 1.7.
A portion of that will go to GSD and a portion to ITA.
A portion of the 1.7 or a portion of the 3.1?
1.7.
Portion of the 1.7. Do we need to break out those portions?
It's actually in the recommendation.
It's in the recommendation. Okay. As stated in the recommendation, whatever the breakout is of the 1.7, that's the recommendation. Without objection, we'll move on to item number 3.
Next thing we need is a crystal ball.
Yes. And we can buy that with this new IT funding.
Maybe we can do an RFP.
Yes. So, Mr. Villanueva, would you please read item number 3?
Yes, sir. Item number 3 is a City Administrative Officer Report and Ordinance relative to the proposed direct sale of the city's surplus properties located at 3557, 3561, and 3565 North Alginet Drive and 16654 West Calvina Drive. We don't have any cards on this item, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, member of the ITGS. My name is Raul Mendoza. I'm here on behalf of the Office of the CAO. This item is for the proposed direct sale of 4 properties, 4 residential lots at 3557, 3561, 3565 North Alginet Drive, and 16654 West Calneva in Encino. The proposed direct sale is for $100,000 for all 4 lots. So these 4 lots are vacant residential lots. They're undevelopable. In the 1960s, there were some heavy rainstorms that caused landslides on these lots. And so the county obtained the properties, and then the city in turn acquired them through tax deeds. More recently, there was, as part of a settlement agreement with the contiguous property owner, there was a settlement agreement and where the city agreed to evaluate the possibility of selling the 4 lots to that contiguous property owner. The settlement agreement stated to make it, the city to make its best efforts to sell it for $50,000. In alignment with that settlement, there was a council motion that instructed GSD to proceed with the surplus process and trying to sell those properties with council approval, of course. So the surplus process, they went through offering the properties to the other governmental agencies. There were no responses. BOE provided the legal description, and the planning, city planning confirmed that the sale is consistent with the Encino-Tarzana community plan. One of the other things in the CAO report is the findings that this is in the public interest. You know, the city's had this property for over 60 years. There's been 3, to my knowledge, and with confirmation from the city attorney, that there were 3 public auctions where there were no buyers for the property, most likely because it's undevelopable land. And one of the agreements with the proposed buyer is that they would have to install retaining walls and pay for those improvements in order to get building and safety permits to be able to develop the land, soil stabilization. So there's definitely a large investment that's needed from the proposed buyer. Again, I mentioned that the settlement agreement was for the city to use its best interest to sell the lots for $50,000. The GSD worked with the city attorney and the proposed buyer, was actually able to get a price of $100,000 for the 4 lots. So the city CAO's report recommends, 1, that the council determine the properties are no longer required for city use and it's in the interest of in the public interest. 2, adopt the ordinance relative to the sale of the properties to the buyer for $100,000. 3, request the city attorney to prepare purchase and sale agreement. And 4, instruct GSD to complete the transactions and process the documentation. I will add that one of the terms of the sale, of course, is that these properties are sold in as-is condition. So,
and I'm assuming that means that where the city's released from any future liability?
Yes, it's sold in as-is and with all faults, and so the city, and without warranty as to fitness for use. So it releases the city from that liability.
That's important. I mean, this makes a lot of sense. The only part I don't like, but it's not so much about our committee here, is that we're under a little bit of duress because of the lawsuit that was involved that initiated this, which I have some questions about, but I don't think that's the forum for that. So at the end of the day, I think this makes sense. But do you have any?
No, just questions, straightforward
On this? And the auction process we went through, you know, how does that work in terms of, we put it out pretty far and wide?
Yeah, so I'm not too familiar with these auctions in particular, but typically if there's a surplus sale, sometimes it could go through a public auction and it gets advertised, or it could just be to the contiguous property owner, which is what happens more often because sometimes they're the most logical purchasers for these types of properties.
Well, I'm going to recommend that we adopt the CAO recommendations as you just laid them out, and without objection, so order.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now items 5 and 6, or 4 and 5, we've done on consent, I believe. And what we need to do now is adjourn the regular ITGS meeting, and we need to move into the special session. So regular meeting is adjourned. I like using the gavel. Special session is begun, and we're now in our special meeting. Ms. Villeneuve, would you please read the agenda item for item 6 of the special agenda?
Certainly, sir. Item number 6 of the special meeting is a CAO report relative to the Innovation Fund. We do not have any speaker cards on this item.
Hello, my name is Anastasia Tarpey, and I'm representing the City Administrative Officer. You have before you a report from the CAO regarding the Innovation Fund, and as part of the 2014-15 adopted budget, the Mayor and Council instructed the CAO to work with the Council, Mayor, Controller, and City Attorney to create an Innovation Fund, which will be administered by the CAO and restructured the Quality and Productivity Commission into the Innovation and Performance Commission. and report on how the recommendation for the use of the Innovation Fund can be administered by ITGS. The budget also provided $1.1 million in the General City Purposes Fund in anticipation of the Innovation Fund being established. Additionally, the city attorney was instructed to prepare ordinances to amend the administrative code to reflect these budget instructions. The city attorney will transmit the ordinances under separate cover. The CAO has worked with commission members, the CLA, the mayor's office, the controller, and city attorney to develop the Innovation Fund program. On August 11th, the commission approved the Innovation Fund program being presented today. The purpose of the Innovation Fund is to create change that tangibly and cost-effectively transforms and improves city services. A further purpose of the Innovation Fund is to create a culture of continuous improvement with the city through innovation, productivity, and performance measurement. The idea for that change can come from anyone at any level in any department, bureau, commission, or office of the city. Thus, the proposed plan would create opportunities for city employees to share his or her what-if ideas. The fund presents an opportunity for testing ideas that may not work out as intended, and ideas can be submitted at any stage of development. Attached to the report is a draft application for your reference. Applications can be submitted to the CAO and Commission either online or on paper, and will be preliminarily assessed against criteria I will describe later. Part 1 of the application is required and asks for key information about the idea. Part 2 and 3 are optional and require more details about the idea and project implementation. With Part 1 being the only required section of the application, the intention is to encourage all employees to submit their ideas. In addition to an inviting application, outreach will also be vital to the first round of the innovation program. So outreach may consist of emails, flyers, presentations, and/or a website. It is anticipated that selected ideas will not be limited solely to technology, but should cover all aspects of city operations and will result in improved customer service for the citizens of Los Angeles. So once applications are submitted, the CAO will assess them using 4 general criteria, the first being innovative and original. Applications should demonstrate how the idea will keep Los Angeles ahead of the curve. The second is to support greater efficiencies. Proposals should improve a process, save time, increase interdepartmental collaboration, provide potential for long-term or ongoing benefits, or generate revenue or quantifiable cost savings. The third criteria is emphasize priority outcomes and quality of life. So project ideas should help create a prosperous city, livable and sustainable city, a safe city, and our well-run government. And the last is be feasible and measurable. The intent of the Innovation Fund is to have a process that encourages timely implementation of ideas. So strong projects should be able to be executed and measured within 6 to 12 months of being funded. After preliminary review, the CAO will forward proposals to departments to get feedback from general managers. The Commission will then review all proposals for funding and make recommendations to ITGS for committee and council consideration and approval. Because this is a new program, we recommend the Innovation Fund be implemented as a 2-year pilot. We recommend that the Commission provide periodic reports with the CAO support. CAO will provide administrative support but cannot do so with existing resources. So we're recommending a project coordinator position to support this program. Once the fund ordinance is effective, the CAO will request salary and expense funds to support this effort. So to recap, we're recommending 1, approval of 1 position of project coordinator. 2, the approval of the 4 general criteria to apply to proposals. And 3, the approval of a 2-year pilot project for the Innovation Fund through 2 fiscal years, and instructing the Commission to report to ITGS within 6 months on approved projects, project status, and whether the project goals are being met, and annually report with a review that includes lessons learned, an assessment of successful and unsuccessful results, and other feedback as needed. And with me today is the President of the Quality and Productivity Commission, Todd Sargent, and we're both here to answer any questions you may have. Thanks.
Great, well, thank you. I think it's very exciting, and glad we have the president of the Innovation Productivity Committee. I think is the new name, and some of the other members. It's, rose by a different color, still smells as sweet, or however you want to. Shakespeare had something, I don't know exactly. But what's really great about this is showing that the city is listening, and that we're listening, and we take seriously the line. The folks who are on the line, who are doing the work every day, and that we know that real innovative solutions come from folks on the ground when you actually take the time to listen. And it's setting up a structure for that. I think we still have some work to go in terms of the structure of, how does the commission score the different proposals and make the recommendation to ITGS, and and that, without setting out some clear, transparent criteria, that could run you into some trouble. So we want to work with you on that. I don't think that has to slow down this motion at all. I think we move forward. I mean, my recommendation, if my colleague agrees with me, would be to move forward on what we've got. But I want to point out that we do have some work to do to figure out a real process to do this, so that people not only feel that they're listened to, but they feel that they've gotten a fair shake. And it's not only about getting the fair shake, but the perception that there's a fair shake, which is sometimes two different things, but equally important. Mr. Farrell, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you. If you could just expand a little bit, either one of you, on the measurables to justify the position and to nurture, this creative thinking, and how we will justify this expense.
Is that on the head count?
What's that?
The head count from the CAO. I'm sorry.
Oh no, just the expenditure of the fund in general, which does include the position of the project coordinator position. Yeah.
So the project coordinator, the CAO will request $100,000 to be transferred, and then that will be helpful to help with the IPC or the QPC and administrating the innovation fund, and then $1 million will be used to give out to projects who have been selected and then can be implemented.
So I'm all for it too. So don't get me wrong here, but just in terms of like the vision for how you see it working.
Sure. Well, I can say that working with the Mayor's Office of Innovation, Budget and Innovation, we've done a lot of research around similar programs that have happened across the country, and we've leveraged the best practices and pulled that into the proposal here. They have some mistakes that we were able to learn from in advance, which is good. So we are looking at, just as Councilman Bloomfield had said, we are definitely looking at a very transparent process, one that doesn't circumvent the normal budget process, so that we're really are funding innovative new ideas and encouraging that sort of bottoms-up approach in terms of expertise within their groups. What we assume is that folks in their positions know their departments far better than the commission, far better than many other folks within the city. So we really are doing we plan to do an aggressive outreach to them and really engage them in the process. We've seen through other cities that they've seen measurable results, mostly around data transparency and just the ability to make better decisions with data. And so that's really our goal ultimately in the near term. Is I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in terms of things that are just the answers that we need to look at and come up with ways to fund those to move them and scale them up. So we are taking it a bit slow. We do have a lot of different expertise within the commission, I have to say. We have a 15-member commission that come from all walks of life, and so I think having that diversity at the table really helps. As we're creating the application, we're reviewing the applications that come through, and ultimately the recommendations that will come to this committee.
Great, and I would recommend a focus on cost savings. I think it's great to enter into this sort of adventurous place because that's inspiring, and so with an eye to cost savings and a better customer service, I really like that approach. So, yeah, thank you.
You mentioned learning from mistakes from other similar ones. I'd be curious, what are some of the mistakes that stand? You don't have to name names, but that stand out.
Some good examples I could think of are just that the programs that were less successful in the public eye were those that didn't go far enough. They were funding sort of run-of-the-mill activities that should have been funded regardless. And so there were some headlines in certain major cities around the innovation funds not being very innovative. And you lose that public support, you lose the elected support after that's perceived that the fund itself isn't doing innovative things. It's not as though there was...
they're funding making copies on both sides or something.
Right, or filling potholes that there are other funds for. So there are innovative ways to touch certain things, and I don't want to presume that we understand exactly what's innovative. That's a sort of a squishy word that we're trying to define through the application process itself. But other than that, our cities have been moving. This is becoming more and more of a leading edge type of thing. We're seeing it across. There are no more funds I don't see any other funds that are longer than maybe 2 years in existence. So there's not a whole lot of data to pull from. But from what is out there, there's just a ton of goodwill that's created within the city system. And I think the challenges have been for those other cities that they didn't do enough outreach to their employees, and they funded sort of safely, very safely. We're going to fail on some of these proposals. That's the whole idea: is fail fast, win fast, and we want to win as fast as we can to scale those out and make major strides for the city overall.
On some of the other ones, do they ever have any of them that ventured into the reward side of things? I mean, the reward for ours is you're a lot of attaboys and bring it before the council and the personal and public recognition you get from coming up with this. But I imagine some cities have actually put financial rewards, which might cut both ways. How is that?
That's right. We talked a lot about that within the commission because there was an initial interest of, nobody's going to apply for these things if they don't get some sort of financial benefit for it. What we've learned anecdotally from other cities is that by incenting applicants, it didn't necessarily drive better results or better ideas. And in fact, this is part of doing our job, is we should be looking at ways to improve what we do on a day-to-day basis. That being said, one of the other major program within the commission is our annual awards process for quality and productivity. And so our thought right now is that we would sort of merge a lot of these themes together and really celebrate the innovative ideas that come through the city in many different ways. So not just the transmission of funds to support the application, but also the public thanks for the work that's being done by employees. And I have to tell you that in my site visits as president of the commission, I've seen a lot of just real great innovative ideas that could scale very easily if they had the incentives fund to do it. And so now I think we've got the means to actually support some of these great programs, which are not only cost saving, but also potentially revenue generating for the city.
Great.
One last question, Mr. Chair. So based on your research, do you have some decent templates to follow in establishing criteria?
Yes.
Yeah. Because that'll be important, of course.
Yes.
It was an easy question.
But yeah. No, there are some that are fantastic. Mm-hmm. I think for us, what we're trying to do is make that available online as quickly as possible so that we could test it and adjust it as necessary. But we do have some really great templates to use from other cities.
And you'll formalize that through your commission work?
Correct. We don't expect to have the first applications in for several months.
Right.
November-ish timeframe with a hopeful recommendation to council by December.
Sounds exciting.
Are the other cities you looked at, do they have the same scale? Or much smaller?
About the same.
About $1 million for similar?
Well, a city of our size, it's sort of scaled, right? So most of them have been in the $1 million range, so we're right on target there.
Although they're probably smaller cities.
There are some smaller ones.
Smaller. They're smaller cities offering
$1
$1
million.
million.
Relatively speaking, we're a little bit low,
yeah.
But hopefully we'll find that there's success in this pilot program and we can scale this as necessary.
Great. Any additional questions?
No, thank you.
Well, great. Then I'm going to recommend that we move forward with this, adopt the CAO recommendations as stated, and wish you Godspeed and goodwill on this project. It's an exciting one, and I believe that clears the agenda. Is that correct, Mr. Villanueva?
Yes, sir.
I will use this gavel, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done.